Hello and welcome. I'm Jimmy May, and on behalf of myself and Aaron Daly, I'd like to welcome you to this segment of the Good Legal Stories series, which is a corollary to the Good Stories movement sponsored by the Normandy Chair for Peace. That's an endeavor whose motto is, "We will have peace on earth when we have peace with the earth." And to that end, the Good Legal Stories series spotlights landmark environmental advocacy from around the globe through the voices of those who made it happen. And today, we're delighted to have with us Dr. Federico Parra to tell us the good legal story of the recyclers case in Colombia. Aaron?
So let me just introduce Federico to everybody. He is an anthropologist with a master's in anthropology and a PhD in political studies and international relations. He's the coordinator of the Waste Pickers program for Latin America of the NGO called WIEGO. And he's a member of the research group on collective and environmental rights of the Faculty of Law, Political and Social Sciences at the National University at Colombia. WIEGO is an NGO that stands for Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing. It's a global research and policy network that seeks to improve the status of the working poor, especially women, in the informal economy. And it does so by highlighting the size, composition, characteristics, and contributions of the informal economy, and by promoting policy dialogues and processes that include representatives of the informal workers' organizations. So here to tell us about a long and broad-based campaign to bring respect and dignity to the waste pickers in Colombia is Federico Parra. Federico?
Erin, Jimmy, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm delighted to do this. I just wonder if you can make me able to share my screen, please.
Yes, of course. You should be able to share your screen now.
Perfect, thank you very much. Well, there you can see my screen. I just want starting saying that this process was led for the National Association of Waste Pickers and the Association of Waste Pickers of Bogota. They are the main actors, and the entities that you mentioned that I represent are supporting entities. What I want to share with you is this story about how waste pickers, organized waste pickers in Colombia, change the legal framework of waste management and the subject position of the waste pickers using legal arguments, human rights perspective, and introducing this perspective into the waste management system. This briefly shows you who are the subject, means the waste pickers, and the area, Colombia, in South America. Like other contexts, waste pickers here in Colombia 20 years ago used to be in dump sites. With the change, but thanks or due to the change of final disposal technology, many waste pickers were expelled in the decade of the 90s of these dump sites. The result is that they have to go to the streets to compete for recyclables that people put in its garbage bags. It means that they recover plastic, glass, cardboard, and other recyclable materials like metals, and reintroduce this into the value chain of recycling. They do this to survive. It means that the main population that did this activity until now are poor and vulnerable one, despite all the benefits, environmental benefits they did. But sadly, the model of waste management here in Colombia, like other countries, prioritize collection, transport, and burial, in our case, in the hands of private companies. And the public policy around that explain the public problem of waste and explain who are the actors and the procedures and methodologies to solve this problem have this paradigm in its hands. It means they understand that the problem is a linear one. And thanks to this, the majority of the public policy in some cases criminalize the work of the waste pickers. Briefly, and I don't want to consume all my time explaining this, you will find in the core of this graphic the waste pickers. In red one, some of the different laws and the different public policy who affect them and how their legal actions to protect their work becomes a sort of block of constitutionality. First of all, just tell to all the audience that in 1992 had happened a terrible situation in Colombia. Many waste speakers were killed and their bodies were sold to the medicine faculty of one university to be used by the students. One way speakers escaped this terrible situation, and this created an indignation, a national indignation, and mobilized many way speakers to organize themselves and ask related to the right to life and the struggle for an integral recognition was the first time. And this produced a law 8 years after, the law 511, who says waste speakers are important, has an environmental role, and things like it. Then this law of public services introduced and reaffirmed the free competitions in the area of public services. The problem here with this law is that this law condemn waste speakers to organize themselves in little municipalities on which there are no recyclables materials. Waste speakers organize themselves and with the support of many legal actors fight for the right to work, to maintain themselves in the recycling, but overall the environmental role of recycling for all the cities, an equal treatment. And the Constitutional Court gives the reason to this statement, who says that not for be private you are efficient, not for be communitarian or public you are inefficient, and allow waste speakers to be in all the cities in Colombia. It was amazing. Then was this tender of waste collection services. And to do that tender in 1997, started research, and one of the main strategies was recycling. But sadly, the terms of reference of this tender doesn't allow waste speakers to maintain themselves because he gave the recycling waste collection to the private companies. Waste speakers fight for the right to stay in the activity, and was the first time that they fight to be integrated and recognized in the public management. Legal action here produced this statement of the Constitutional Court, who says that for any decision that the government wants to take around waste management and recycling needs to make a consultation, previous consultation with the waste speakers. And the other issue that this statement says, they are poor and vulnerable, but they are also environmental agents. It means that this tourism needs the development of positive discrimination. What's quite interesting in terms of the way that the Constitutional Court reframed this. Then we have this national decree in 2002, who says that the recyclables are property of the state, the governments, and the governments give this property rights to the private companies. Waste speakers go out to the street saying that this criminalizes their work because if a waste speaker was collecting recyclables can be treated like a robber. And finally, the government decide to talk not about property rights, but the responsibility. The conclusion of this action was that this decree says that the waste is not property rather than a responsibility of the authorities. So waste speakers can continue extracting recyclable material from the bags of waste put in the public space. There was this another measure taken in 2003, was related to the car horses. It's a vehicle that used to be used by waste speakers to transport its recyclables, and try to eliminate these car horses because create problems of mobility in the cities. What waste speakers says and what they claim is that if they lose this mean of work, this instrument, they cannot bring food to the table. And the legal action produced this statement who says that rather than eliminate, you need to replace. And governments here are obliged to make the substitution of vehicles for, and this was quite interest in terms of recognition. We advance so fast, this law says or punish the three different moments of work of the waste pickers, means recover the materials, collection and transport, and selling. This law search, or at that moment was searching for transform some bad habits, but the problem is that the waste picker says we are not part of the problem, we are part of the solution, and we are not recognized as a part of the solution. We are criminalization our work. And the legal action here produced this statement who says that these sanctions, environmental sanctions, cannot apply to the waste picker because the problem is that people in his house doesn't make separation in the source. Commercial actors doesn't explain what happens with your packaging, and the big industry doesn't have commitment with all the packaging that they import or produce. Well, there is the Cali case. A dump site was closed. People, waste pickers who were working there, entered into a terrible human emergency. They don't have how to sustain themselves. And in this case, with the support of many legal actors, NGOs, they fight for guarantee the means of survival, their basic means. But what is interesting of this one is that the statement produced by the Constitutional Court doesn't search just the recognition of the waste pickers as a providers of services. They search for an integral attention, means education, access to health system, recreational one. They said any of the different arms of the local government needs to design some specific political policy, public policy intervention that allows the people to maintain and protect its dignity. It's not only about livelihood means, but an entire decision, a growing one. And other issue related to this statement, sorry, is that they said that waste pickers are able and have the right to grow in its own activity, not to remain collecting cardboard to sell cardboard, but organize themselves and create its own social enterprises. Finally, we have this new tender in Bogota related to the management of the landfill. And waste picker says there are a lot of statements of the Constitutional Court that are not fulfilled. We need that they became a reality. Constitutional Court says right, and the solution of this tender are not enough. And this, what we call here is auto, which is the statement of the Constitutional Court who tried to prove the level of fulfillment of the statement, previous statements. And this tender plus the 2011 tender of waste collection service prove that the different statement of the Constitutional Court that have been mentioned previously weren't fulfilled. It means that in this auto 2275 of 2011, what the Constitutional Court did was collect all the different statements and create one big statement having or changing the paradigm of waste management here in Colombia, passing from collection and transport in hands of private to recycling with recognition and remuneration of waste pickers. That's the main goal. And waste pickers win the right to be remunerated as a providers of services, which is really amazing. It means that the waste pickers were recognized as a subject of special protection of the state, not only because their poverty and vulnerability, but the environmental, social, and public benefits that its work provides to the city. Recognize that the main measure is ensure their participation in the provision of the recycling service, but overall receive a payment. What the Constitutional Court says, if they weren't waste pickers, you have to pay to the private waste collection companies for the work that they did. Why we shouldn't pay to the waste pickers for its work? Recognize the entrepreneurial potential of the waste pickers, the potential that they have to grow in the value chain, but overall, give the responsibility to local authorities to create affirmative actions that ensure that payment. It's interesting because this scenario emerged from that. Did you remember this white and black picture of the 80s and waste picker? Well, many waste picker organizations achieve vehicles, warehouses, some machines, uniforms. Sadly, it's not for all. This slide, I like it so much because shows you that in 2016, waste picker organizations were paid just only in Bogota. It means that for 2016, waste picker in Bogota received the payment for selling its recyclable material plus a payment that comes from the public policy service or the public service of recycling. And this comes for the fee that citizens pay of the waste management. It means that for the first time in the world, waste picker receive a remuneration, is not a salary, it's a remuneration for its service plus the selling of materials. And this multiply in some cases by 2 or 3 its income. For 2017, we have 8 cities, and for 2018, we have at least 25 cities on which there were at least one waste picker organization who provide and be paid for these services. For 2019, 87 municipalities report recycling services, and there were at least 366 providers, 36 private, the rest organization of waste pickers. And this is amazing because changed the life of the waste pickers. Sadly, governments and advocacy coalition were able to change this incredible scenario into the regulation in public policy. I just want to mention that when pandemic arrives, the organization that achieved some level of formalization were able to face this situation. And the main goal that they did was, despite the quarantine times, they were able to go out to the streets to work because they provide an. Just to finalize, I was mentioned that waste pickers were able to answer or to have a good answer to the pandemic, not all. Sadly, what I mentioned, this creates now an bad situation in which many private want to take advantage of all but waste pickers when, well, our role here, as I mentioned, WIEGO and also the research group of the National Association of the National University of Colombia, the HICA, but other professionals and other entities support the organizations doing what? Creating good legal arguments to make a right interpretation of its demands and try to translate it in the power language that jurisprudence needs. Created some specific research and providing this evidence, empirical evidence, to the Constitutional Court to support the arguments of the waste pickers. That's more or less the role that we have been playing in this. Thank you very much for the invitation again, Erin, Jimmy, and hope this works.
Yeah, so Dr. Parra, just one follow-up if I could. And what's your role in this? I mean, what inspired you to become involved in this effort?
I've been working with waste pickers since 1997, since I was a student. And I have to say that I always pursued in my personal equation trials for myself in a sort of organic intellectual, as Gramsci mentioned. I'm not achieved that means, but I'm really want to invite everybody that hears us and plays an academical role to think in its own work as a useful work. And it means involve yourself not only with entities who provide those services to the NGOs, but to be close to an NGO, to work along. NGO means member organization-based entities, organization of community.
Well, fantastic. So Dr. Parra, on behalf of the Normandy Chair for Peace, thank you so much for being a part of this great legal story. And that concludes this installment of the Good Legal Stories series of the Normandy Chair for Peace. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.